Thank you so much, Lamont. Wonderful, and thank you so much for the opening comments. It's great to have everybody today with us. Thank you for joining us. It's going to be a wonderful session. We're really looking forward to spending some time with you all today. So if you don't know where you are, you have stumbled upon the key executive leadership programs here at American University in Washington, D.C. We've been doing leadership development for the public service since right after the Beatles released the Let It Be album. And that's something we are very proud of, a program that has been focused on love and kindness and compassion and peace for 50 plus years. And we are all so happy to have you here with us. We have an exciting panel for you today that we're going to hear from. And before we get started, I did want to also say thank you to Lamont and to Bree and Jennifer and the whole key team that always makes these things happen so well. So thank you all, as usual, for the amazing work that you do. You know, the people that we talk a lot about the people that we lead and the people that we work with, but I want to start by suggesting that the people, not just the people that we work with or the people that we lead or our colleagues or the people we work for, but the people we love, the people we care about, the people that surround us day to day, not only at work, but at home and whenever we're out socially distanced, the people are concerned. Right now, our nation is a nation of very frightened people, people that are stressed, people that are lonely. The numbers that have come out in the last year have been extraordinary. And even prior to COVID, we had extraordinary numbers of Americans that were scared. The Chapman University survey of American fears comes out every January. And last January, prior to the COVID pandemic really hitting our shores, before it really became national news, 3 of the top 10 fears that Americans faced were related to healthcare. And that was pre-COVID. We know that the Americans are stressed. 80% or more of our nation is stressed. And that was pre-COVID. And we also know, and this is something that's really garnered the attention in the last couple of years of leadership professors and social scientists and people that look at these kind of things, we know that our nation's a lonely nation. And when I say lonely, I think many of us will default to the idea that, oh, the lonely people are the older people, and the younger generation with all their connectivity is less lonely. And that's really not true. It's actually quite the opposite. The younger generation, the Gen Zs, the millennials, are the ones suffering more from loneliness now. So all of those around us, whether we work with them or just live next door to them or see them at the grocery store, are scared and stressed and lonely. So if there's ever been a time for kindness, if there's ever been a time for love and compassion, now is that time. And we have the right panel today to talk about some of these issues. And I want to encourage everyone on the line to please respond, jump out on the chat, ask questions. I'm going to be tracking that while our panelists are talking, and we'll make this a conversational, enjoyable time together. So once again, thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to get this rolling. And I'm going to introduce all of our panel to begin, and then I'm going to go to Andrew for the first question. But we're very fortunate today to have with us Andrew Bennett. Andrew is a professor in the Key program. He's been a practitioner for 27 plus years, going all the way back to his time with Ross Perot, with some magnificent stories about his time working with Ross Perot and his company. And Andrew is just such a wealth of knowledge. Andrew, thank you for being here with us today. We also have Kimya Lee, who's the Executive Director of Strategic Workforce Planning and Analysis at the Department of Homeland Security. She is also on our Key Advisory Council. And Kimya is one of those rare leaders that actually went from tech to exec. I just actually made that up, Kimya. I made that tech to exec. Isn't that good? I think that's the title of an article. I'm going to make sure I put a star next to that. But she did, and that's important because in terms of our thinking capacity and the way that we view the way we lead, it's a very important distinction. So I'm going to leave Kimya to talk about that. And then also Reggie Wells, the former Chief Human Capital Officer of the Social Security Administration and a professor in the Key program. Reggie, thank you as well for joining us today. And last but not least, Ruth Zaplin. We call her the intellectual firepower behind the Key program, Key professor, and also host of Mindfulness Mondays podcast, which is a wonderful podcast. If you all are interested in partaking of that, you can find that on the Key website. Ruth has helped so many people over the previous year start their week with a positive outlook and a mindful outlook. Ruth, it's great to have you as well. So thank you all again for being here. And I want to start with my first question to Andrew. You know, Andrew, we talked about this kind of as we were getting ready for this panel. And I was like, I don't want to be the negative person here, but I'm going to be the negative person. Why do we care? I mean, so why do we care about kindness and love? I mean, let's just put it this way. We're in the workplace, man. It's about productivity and mission accomplishment. You got your problems, leave them at home. This is not professional. Tell us how you feel about that, my friend. Why do we care?
Well, that's one perspective on it.
Not mine. It's not mine. I was just setting up the question.
I know you said you'd be a little bit of a devil's advocate. And I think that's when I think about leadership, there's the 10,000-foot altitude of leadership, and that's about getting the job done. And one definition of there's probably as many definitions of leadership as there are people on this in this conversation, but one definition is getting work done through people, and that's that kind of 10,000-foot level. But there's also, for me, leadership is, or it can be, more of a sacred opportunity because you're working with people's lives. And so there's the 30,000-foot level of leadership, which is about making the world a better place through people. So that question that you ask about why should we care, it's kind of a troubling question, Patrick. I mean, the question for me is why would we not lead with love and kindness? And I think most people want to live their lives with love and kindness. And the challenge is that the world of work has a lot of dynamics that make it challenging to do that. And when you get to the bottom of it, it's fear that gets in the way. Maybe that's a maybe that's a conversation for another day. So to answer the question about why should leaders care, and isn't it really just about getting the job done? There is research that shows when leaders care about people and demonstrate it, that it actually pays off. There is actually a measurable ROI on love and kindness in leadership. And I'll talk about that. But I thought the best way to talk about this is to just share a quick story about leading with love and kindness that might make the point more effectively than data, actually. Uh, Patrick mentioned at the beginning of my career, I worked for U.S. Former presidential candidate Ross Perot at his IT company, EDS. And one weekend, I was involved in a motorcycle accident in northern Michigan that nearly ended my life. It was a Sunday in April, and Ross was in Dallas at the time. And he got on a plane. He flew to Detroit, got a connection to Traverse City, where I was, took a cab, and he stood by my bed in the hospital to tell me that he would make sure I received the best care possible. I would continue to be paid. My job would be waiting for me when I was healed, and I was not to rush the process. I mean, he was there less than an hour and he flew back to Dallas. Um, at this stage, Ross hadn't run for president at this point in time, but he was already a pretty big deal. I mean, he was the wealthiest man in America. He was leading over 40,000 people. Revenue was at 3.4 billion a year, I think, at that point in time. I mean, he had responsibilities beyond what most of us would understand. Yet he took an entire Sunday to travel to reassure one employee that his boss cared about him. And that's just one example of that spirit of caring that existed in EDS. It was in our organizational DNA. It was in our culture to care. And that culture started at the top and was followed throughout the company. Um, that's why the way that you behave really matters as a leader. What you say and do as a leader gets magnified throughout the organization. EDS was a massive success story by all the business metrics. And one of the main reasons we were successful was because our mission was, we articulated it as, we wanted to provide legendary customer service. And we did. I mean, I have some stories about the lengths that I went to serve our customers. And the reason that employees were able to provide that kind of legendary customer service was because, I believe, our leaders gave us legendary compassion. So, all right, so now if we approach this from more of an academic perspective, love and kindness in leadership actually has been studied. It's been the subject of several research studies, and I won't go into the details, but for anyone out there, I'm happy to share these studies for anyone who is interested. There's a particular study about love and kindness in leadership in healthcare that's particularly compelling, and that particular that study has a great title. It's called "What's Love Got to Do with It?" But in researching love in a work context, research developed this term, which is companionate love. Companionate. So like your companion with an ATE at the end, companionate love. And in research, it's defined as affection, compassion, caring, and yes, tenderness for others. It's based on warmth, connection, and the affection we feel for those with whom our lives are deeply intertwined. And it's an other focused emotion. It promotes interdependence and sensitivity towards other people. So the research suggests that when this kind of love is present in the workplace, it builds interpersonal resources that can help employees cope with and even reverse the negative effects of emotional exhaustion, which, as Patrick said, I think in this last year, I think there's a lot of people who are emotionally exhausted. So to be able to express that kind of companionate love of caring and kindness, it will help people reverse the negative effects of that kind of emotional exhaustion. Companionate love creates physiological effects that reduce employees' absenteeism because they have better immune function and they're able to experience physical recovery from work stresses, and there's less absenteeism due to illness. Companionate love leads to higher levels of teamwork, of trust, of job satisfaction, higher levels of engagement, lower levels of disengagement and turnover. So all of this is documented in the research. And I completely agree with you, Patrick, that right now our world needs leaders who can show love and kindness. And for some, love and kindness in leadership is an oxymoron. You know, some believe that kindness in leadership, that's soft. But in my experience, love and kindness build strength.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I want to open this up to the rest of the panel to comment on as well. But I know that, so many of us, and we hear this in our programs from some of the folks that come through where they say, this is great, but my boss, it's not going to work. All they want me to do is just get the job done and leave it alone. Reg, I'm going to come to you a little bit later on and ask you about specifically what leaders need to do. But just in general, how is it that how do we really communicate those messages of love, or how have we seen those communicated well in a workplace setting? Any examples from the panel?
I have an example.
Thank you, Kimya.
Uh, so I know a lot of times when you mention the Department of Homeland Security, love and kindness may not be the first adjectives that come up to describe the department. However, I do want to say during COVID, specifically during COVID, but even before, our Chief Human Capital Officer, Angela Bailey, sends out a daily inspiration note to all of DHS, 250,000. And in those notes, sometimes it is just a reminder that the work that you're doing is important because it will impact someone's life or just a reminder that, you know, yes, this is stressful, but you can get through it. Um, and a lot of times, it's not so much about going overboard or saying, you know, I care for you, or reminding people these are all of the ways in which we show we care by the benefits we provide. Sometimes it's just receiving that email. And sometimes you get it and it goes, you know, you see it, you put it, you know, in the recycle trash bin. But other times it catches you off guard when you really, really need to hear it. And so I think we have to remember that. So we can show love and kindness in many ways. And sometimes it doesn't affect everyone the same. And sometimes you get this opportunity when you least expect it. So,
Thank
Patrick,
you.
I have a
Yeah,
personal
Reg, please.
experience to Kimya's point, and obviously it's reflective of what Andrew's talking about and what you talked about. I was very surprised at the retirement celebration for one of my executive team. I guess I had been at Social Security for about maybe 5 or 6 years, and so we had the celebration for him. He had been in the agency for over 40 years and was well known across the agency, and he headed up our area, our Office of Learning. And as he was giving his remarks, he surprised me with a story about me on my first experience with him. And I was just struck by his being impacted by something so small. So we were on our way from SSA as a pretty big campus and headquarters, and we were walking from the main administration building to where his offices were in the complex. And he said, as he was thanking me for our working relationship, he said, I knew you were going to be somebody I could connect with very, very strongly, because we were on our way to my office. An employee was coming down the hall with a load of papers. It was a young woman, and it was a big stack of papers, and it appeared like she was going to drop them all, but she had dropped a few. And he said, I stopped and picked them up and carried them for her the rest of the way to where she was going. And he said, I didn't expect that from you. You know, you're coming in as the Chief Human Capital Officer, as the Deputy Commissioner of Human Resources, and you helped somebody you didn't even know, and you had just gotten to the agency. And obviously you weren't too full of yourself to help somebody who was having difficulty. And you just never know when you're going to have that kind of impact on someone. The way to Kimya's point, you know, and I'm not surprised Angie does that at DHS, but just getting a message like that and having it go out to so many employees, you know, it's going to have impact on a significant number of those people, because we're all going through something. We're all going through something, and it's just the human touch means so much to us, especially in these times when we are so disconnected just physically because of the pandemic.
And
Yeah.
a very simple way I would add, just to throw this in, is even in your one-on-one conversations, just being completely present for the other person. I call it listening with squinting ears, right? Open-minded, curious, present.
Yeah, thank
That's
you,
love.
Ruth. You know, I've seen that referred to as well, and I think we've talked about it before, as what many refer to as the simple act of noticing, which when we're able to just simply notice that there may be someone around us, you know, the example of, you know, that Reggie gave of someone dropping things, the example that Kimya gave of a very simple gesture, but the simple act of noticing is such a lovely thought. And if we can just break away from all of the stress we have and all of the deadlines and all the things we're dealing with for just that one moment, for that simple act of noticing, that can go a really long way. Kimya, I wanted to pose the next question to you, and And when I do, I would like to ask that you to please remember when you answer this that you're talking to me and not to like really smart people, uh, because Dr. Lee has this. She's got this degree in something, this PhD, and I don't know what it's some really atmospheric, stratospheric statistics, something. And so I'm going to ask Kimya a data question. The data, there's data out there that always seems to call, when you look at workplace data, that work satisfaction, work culture, inclusion, all of those things. When you see the data really across the nation, it always seems to call for more kindness. I mean, it seems astounding to me that year after year after year after year. I mean, here we are talking about something that should be as human as it can possibly be, the simple, concept of human connection and caring. And yet all that data is out there that seems to call for it. But is anyone listening? I mean, is anyone listening to this?
Yes. No. Maybe. It all depends on how we define this, right? So I believe that data is rendered meaningless if it's not transformed into insight. And that's the point that's being missed. So yes, when we think about data, when we think about numbers, even when we think about the statistics that you just put out in the beginning of this conversation, there are like cold-hearted facts. And until we really take a step back and see that the data isn't about employees, the data isn't just about stress levels. What I love about data is that I see myself in that data, and it allows me to see other people. And so when you get that number, that job satisfaction number, or that employee engagement number, or even the COVID numbers, if you just take a step back and think that that is someone's husband, someone's father, someone's brother, someone's sister, mother, nephew, neighbor, that's part of that. And then you will view the numbers as something totally different. And so, yeah, I may get my federal employee viewpoint scores, and they may go up or they may go down. But the direction doesn't matter. What matters is this is the opportunity that our employees, our colleagues are saying, hey, this is how I'm feeling at this point in time. And that's what we should be thinking about the numbers as, not just, unfortunately, over the year, COVID numbers have gone up, or the proportion of people who are testing positive for COVID, or even the death rate. It's not about that. We become way too numb that numbers just mean numbers and facts. It's not until we really take a step back to really understand that there are lives behind that. And this gets to Andrew's point. Earlier, he said that kindness doesn't mean softness, right? Actually, it's the opposite. And so when you look at those numbers and you see your employee satisfaction scores are declining, being kind is like offering your workforce the opportunity to get better training. That is being kind. Being kind is encouraging someone to perform at their full potential. That's what being kind is. Being kind is also having those hard conversations with your employees or colleagues or peers, even within your life, that things are not working out. These are some of the gaps I see. That's what being a kind leader is, as well as circling back to the data. If you only view data for data's sake, you're missing a huge opportunity. You're missing the opportunity to be kind, be thoughtful, be empathetic, and being compassionate. And until we start seeing those hard numbers and transforming that into this insight of how do I connect with these individuals, or how do I amplify their potential in a way that shows I care, but also give them the opportunities that are needed to really perform. And so you ask, it seemed as if data calls for more kindness. And I agree. As leaders, we just have to view data that way.
So Kimya, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that for every data point out there, that kind of represents a human person, right?
I would say for every data point out there represents a human person.
Yeah, and think of the things that are involved in that human nature, you know, the soul, the dreams, the love, the fear, all the parts that come with just being a human being.
You know, if we break it down into the bare minimum, you know, we get to that. However, we can't always be at that level, because then we become overwhelmed with the data and we don't know what to do with it. And so as leaders, but also as consumers of data, being able to decipher and pull out that insight becomes important. There's the old line that there's, statistics, you can draw any conclusion from statistics, right? You can have two experts in the same field looking at the same data, but come out with two completely different findings. And it is that, it's like, yes, these are cold, hard facts, but it takes the individual and all of their experience to bring insight from those facts. And until we start thinking about data in that way, then it will always seem that it is just hard, cold numbers, and there's no kindness in there.
So I wonder if, and I'll pose this to the other committee members, the other panelists as well. Is there an inclination for us to lean on data, modeling, statistics, as kind of a comfort level, like it's easy to go, okay, well, that's the number. I mean, is there a barrier to us making that leap that Kimya is talking about really recognizing that represents more than just a data point? Is there something in the way we think, or maybe the way we view the world, that makes us want to do that?
You know, Patrick, this is, I think, a little peripheral to your question, but one of the things in my work over the years that has been challenging in working with clients is getting data and spending a majority of time deflecting the data or dismissing the data or defending against the data. So my challenges, like on a practical level, have been more about how do we get curious about the data, particularly when, Kimya was talking about this feedback, particularly when it's feedback. People, sometimes it's hard not to take that personally. And that just triggers the primitive brain and we go into defense mode. So if we can develop the ability and support each other in kind of transcending that initial reaction to react to data. And I think curiosity is a really important value to have into kind of leaning forward and saying, all right, that kind of hits me and makes me feel a little defensive, but I want to find out more about that and more about translating that into practical action that I can take.
I would
I'm
add
gonna give a
something.
little-
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, Ruth. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Ruth.
Go ahead, Ruth.
Go ahead.
You're too kind, Reg.
Oh, it's just because he's on this panel. He's not normally this way.
So no, I just want to underscore what Kimya and Andrew said. I remember in graduate school, one of the most influential books I read was How to Lie with Statistics. And so I know how to do that. And I think what Kimya said is so important. And that's to remember that data has a soft underbelly. And you need to look for it, which requires what Andrew suggested, curiosity. Always remember, data has a soft underbelly.
Nicely stated, Ruth. Thank you. Reg, you were going to add something?
Sure. And Ruth, I do love you. So I'm, what I was going to contribute in response to Kimya is that I think people use data to avoid not everybody, obviously I'm making a gross generalization, but some use data to avoid getting intimate with the stories and the realities of what that data reflects. To Ruth's point, the soft underbelly. And I think we tend to intellectualize way too much. And because it makes us vulnerable to tap into our feelings, we try to stay away from those because we have been taught very often in our leadership journey that that's not the appropriate way to get people to do what you need them to do. I think it's just the opposite, quite frankly. I think if we don't connect with people on an emotional level, we are not going to be very effective in leading them or having them want to follow, quite frankly.
Yeah, thank you, Reg.
It just occurred to me, the data could be left, you could think of it as left brain, right? And what we're talking about here, love and kindness, is really talking about right brain. And we need both.
And aren't we
So,
talking as well,
before
Ruth?
you go on, Patrick, can I just
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
that?
Please.
So, Ruth, I understand the direction in which you're taking at. Part of what we struggle with is we just put data in a separate box, and we shouldn't do that because then it becomes too easy to excuse it, right? And so no, it's not left brain, right brain, or anything like that. It is really taking that and using it to the best of our ability. I just don't want to create another box for this and give people an out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Kimya, and for the response to the question. Great discussion. We're going to come back to this as well in a bit, I'm sure. But Reg, I want to pose the next question to you. You know, we've been talking about, Andrew made the point about why we ought to care, what's out there in terms of why we ought to care. And Kimya shared about the challenges of using data in the right way and recognizing what data really is and what it's not. As a leader, what are we to do? I mean, so we've got, everybody, certainly everyone that's in this session with us, if you're working in a public or a nonprofit organization, you're not going to straighten up your desk at the end of the day and say, oh, I'm all caught up, I'm great now. It's just not going to happen. You're never going to have the resources. You're never going to have a number of people you need. It's just not going to happen. So you've always got things on that to-do list that are demanding, that require your time and thinking. And so how do leaders, how do they practically address these challenges?
Well, the most important thing we do as leaders, and Ruth has preached this to me on many a day, and Kimya alluded to it, and that is make meaning, provide insights from the data, from the experiences we're having. And we have to sometimes, particularly when we go into I was thinking when we were talking about this session, I was thinking of all of the new environments I've gone into over the course of my career as a leader. And you go into these places and you sometimes run into employees who are afraid to have a good time in the office, who you hear no laughter. You don't have them showing kindness to one another, let alone the people we serve. I've always worked in domestic programs where we were supposed to be serving people who had tremendous needs to be met. And you go into these environments and you get the sense that the people are being held back from being human. It's almost like they're expected to come to the office and be automatons to make things happen as like widgets in a machine. And they're supposed to leave their humanity at the door. And that, in my opinion, is not the best way to try to provide particularly public service in any sector, whether it be a nonprofit, private nonprofit situation, or a governmental service, or frankly, even a private sector service. It's all about people. You know, whatever we do is about people, and we have to connect to that. And so I've always been partial to the importance of humility in a leader. And so the work of Shine and Shine has always resonated with me. Humble leadership, I think, is a very effective, and it's not incompatible with other presentations along those lines: servant leadership, transformational leadership. I mean, when you're in a leadership position, you're always dealing with change. And in order to get people to work together toward that change, whether it be improving services, changing a service model, dealing with challenges being imposed by appropriators and legislators and executives higher in the food chain. In order to do those things, people have to be connected. And ideally, they should care about each other and the work that they're doing. And so it's very important to try to pay attention to what do these people need. You know, we often talk about when we're working with people around their leadership journey, you know, become the leaders we need for this time. You know, what do we need today in our leadership? And too many people are stuck in a model or have learned such bad habits about how to relate to people that they don't work on their emotional intelligence. They don't do the things that are necessary to show empathic concern. You and I, Patrick, did some back-to-back blogs, and you admonished, I think, the leadership community about not being connected and not showing the level of kindness and love that's necessary. And I came behind it because of the timing with a blog about the George Floyd murder and how many people just couldn't, in my opinion, show the vulnerability that was necessary to give their employees a forum for discussing that horrible, horrible experience. Now, you know, what was interesting to me is that obviously there was a segment of our population that experienced that type of thing on a regular basis or paid attention to it in our society. And there's a part of our society that felt it was an exceptional kind of thing, but you know, couldn't possibly be as common as some make it out to be. And when they saw that on video in real time, there was an aha moment for a lot of people. It was a perfect opportunity for connectedness in a way we've never seen, at least not for a very long time, if ever. And some places squandered the opportunity. I've talked with people who said, you know, they didn't even mention it in my workplace, or they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. And all they had to do was listen, really. Just provide a forum for people to express themselves. And the same is true if we're talking about laughter and just a good feeling in the workplace. Talk to your people. Ask them, you know, what would lighten things up around here? A great sports, you know, when you talk about sports, how, and you and I, you know, we're competitors, at least in football. Incidentally, folks, Patrick's a Dallas Cowboy fan, and I'm a long-suffering Philadelphia Eagles fan. But how often do they talk about the player in the locker room who keeps everything light? You know, because you know it's you know, playing those sports is tough. A lot of money on the line, And the person who keeps everybody loose and feeling good about things, very often that's the difference between being the winner of the Super Bowl and not. So the same is true in our workplaces. You know, you don't want people coming to work being as tense in the workplace as they have to be in their real life because they're dealing with real issues. And if they're dealing with problems and you say to them, leave that at the door, don't bring that in here, you are asking them to do the impossible. No one has that degree of discipline. If I've got a sick child at home and you're telling me I can't worry about my sick child at home, you've sent a signal that you don't care. You don't have that empathic concern for me as a human being, and then you want me to turn around and give 120%, give that discretionary effort. It's not going to happen. So we have to show people and model a behavior that will bring everybody together and have them working on a common purpose. That's what leadership is all about.
You know, Reg, those are such important points, and I want to pose a question to you. But before I do, since you brought up the Eagles, Lamont, could you please have Dana Brown removed from the conference immediately? She just said, "Go Eagles." I'm just kidding, Dana. And for Kendrick Smith, who said he knew there was something he liked about me because of the Cowboys, you might want to make sure Kendrick has some sort of free gift from the Key program. Okay, now back to where we were. So there was and I am going to get to the chats that I'm seeing coming through, and thank you all for going with our jokes here. I saw a question in the chat a minute ago, a situation that really struck me. And Reg, I want to pose this question to you, and then I certainly want the other panelists to chime in as they feel they would like to. A macho culture. The example was Department of Defense. Where you've got a senior 06. So in the Army world, that would be a colonel. In the Navy world, that would be a captain, or in the Air Force, that would be a colonel as well. A senior 06 who, had the macho approach, just no time for anything that wasn't the mission focus. I mean, you all know the type that I'm talking about here. It just no compassion for the people that they work with, all about themselves, et cetera. And the example being that they end up leaving, they get a huge award when they leave and they go on to a better job. When we see situations like that, I mean, we're all talking about something that the five of us believe in very deeply, but how do we advise someone who's working in an environment like that with a senior member like that? Well, Reg, let's start with you, and then anyone else that would like to chime in. What would you advise them? How would you advise them to respond to that?
Well, it's a tough situation. If the person is, and I think how I would characterize that you're sort of describing the sort of prototypical toxic male, who is all about business and doesn't have time for that touchy-feely stuff. The reality is that the soft skills are the hardest skills to apply and get right, because it is about people, and they come in all shapes and sizes and temperaments, and they bring all kinds of realities to the workplace that you either allow them to be authentically whole about or not. And depending upon how you play that, you get what you get. But if I had a person who I reported to that didn't show that level of regard, and I actually have worked for some people who, I don't know if they were quite that bad, but they turned off the staff by virtue of their behavior, ranting, raving, name calling, dressing down people, publicly as opposed to behind closed doors if they felt it was necessary, being insulting, shaming people. There are ways of working up and managing up. Certainly you want to try to show, ideally you want to be able to have that kind of conversation, and that requires, trying to foster a culture of candor, being able to tell the emperor he or she has no clothes. But frankly, a person who is toxically that way, a person who is, let's say, a malignant narcissist and just can't get there, what will happen, in my experience, is people will leave. You will lose your talent, and you may get to a point where you decide that you can't take it anymore and you need to have the courage to step out from that situation. And you may find yourself one day, that person reporting to you, and then you can really deal with it.
You know, there's karma when that happens.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you, Reg. Any thoughts from the other committee members on that one, the other council members?
I really appreciate this question, and to the person that asked it, I really respect you for bringing it up in this forum, first of all. And I feel for you, because this is something that I've experienced so many times in my work. Just did a count the other day, and I've worked with over 130 organizations in the last 27 years. And this issue comes up all the time. And excuse me, I wish I had a more optimistic answer for it, but at this point in life, I have to be realistic. And where I've kind of arrived at this point is Gandhi's wisdom, which is be the change you wish to see in the world. And so lead in that, as you said, you lead with love and kindness. And in that environment, it's really challenging for you. Well, keep doing that. Even if it's not supported around you, keep doing that. And you impact that circle of influence that you have. And it's possible that your circle of influence can expand and influence, people outside of that, and it can influence up. But my experience, and this is where I wish I could be more optimistic, but my experience is look at it this way. It is hard for me to make changes in myself when I want to.
Well, but you're so perfect. I mean, we know. Well, that's what
No,
you were telling us. That's what you were telling us before we let everybody in the session. Wait.
It's hard for me to make change when I want to, let alone somebody who isn't aware, let alone somebody who doesn't want to, let alone somebody who has succeeded and been rewarded for the kind of behavior that has gotten them there. I mean, that's just such a tall order to try and change that. I always feel bad about this. I wish that I had more optimism, but I think it's like Reg said also, that, you either get to the point where you can have a crucial conversation that may have an impact, or you realize that life's too short and I need to go someplace else where my values are appreciated. Quite a while ago, I started working with clients who I didn't have to convince that this kind of stuff was important and valuable and useful. I looked for people who got it, and I want to work with those people.
So
Thank you,
Patrick,
Andrew. Yeah, Kimya, please.
if I can just, I totally understand where this question came from. And it just brought back all of these memories for me. I remember when I was first starting out, I'm not going to name where I was working at, but I worked for an individual who was pretty hardcore, I would say. And I got to the point where I decided to leave, to go somewhere else. And the individual, I sat down with them. I thought I was going to have a pretty candid conversation about why, because, I'm an adult now, and this is what adulting means in the business world. And so I put down my letter of resignation to start the conversation. And the person bolted up, threw it at me, and said, "You will never succeed anywhere." And just walked out, right? I have to admit, that shook my confidence for a long time. And it is true what both Reggie and Andrew is saying, that this is a hard nut to crack. And it is hard enough to change your own behavior, less likely you're going to change someone else's behavior. What that taught me was, one, as a leader, I hope I will never make anyone feel the way I felt. And so maybe that's why I'm on this panel, right? And maybe that was a changing point in my career. Two is being able to have, you can think of it as a board of trustees, like that tight group where you can go and be vulnerable and you can tell them how you're feeling. And they may have some tips for you. But the situation, the person who posed the question and who's going through this, who have gone through this, or who will go through this, it's not an easy fix. And whatever decision you make is going to be a tough decision, whether or not you stay, whether or not you just stop giving 120%, or whether or not that leader leaves and get a promotion. So what? They're no longer in your space. And so.
Thank you, Kimya. And I go back to the comment that you had made before, when you were talking about being clear. And Andrew, I'm going to combine that with the comment that you made about, we can change it. I think there's a strong message from both of you and Reg from you as well, that is, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just not. All of the research and articles that you'll ever read about working with narcissists will always, if they're honest, they will always say, you know what, your only solution may be to leave. It just may be your only solution. Now, don't go, get yourself fired until you have the other job, those kind of things. But it may be your only solution because it can break you down psychologically, physically, can break you down. To the degree that we can bring this to the attention of this person or through some other more covert means. Yes, but it's I think all three of you, such a great point. And I appreciated the question on the chat very much, because as all of you said, there are so many people that face this. But you know what? Here's the good news. If I get to be Pollyannish for 1 minute, be Pollyannish for just a second. The good news is this, is that no one that works for anybody on this call will ever turn out to be one of those leaders, right? Because we have the ability in the positions that we hold to have the influence on those around us to ensure that the next generation of leadership that grows up either with us or as part of our teams, that they don't behave that way, that kind of behavior is not acceptable. And Kim, you're going back to your comment about holding people accountable, and being clear, and that being an issue of kindness. It is, when we hold people, when there are people that work with us or for us, where we can hold them accountable, it's incumbent upon us, I think, to say, look, that's not acceptable here. That type of behavior is not acceptable. And it's not going to fly in this organization. We're not going to have it. And that will mold that next generation. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I'm sure, which is wonderful. And I did want to make one other comment too about a chat. And Ruth, I'm going to bring this right to your question as well. There was a chat comment a couple of minutes ago that said, my good intentions. I feel that I'm trying to do the best I can, but I feel like I'm doing nothing right. And, this kind of gets to, that comment, the frustration that I sensed from that chat, and then also the frustration that I hear from, talking to Reg and to Kimya and to Andrew about this other chat, which is just that, we all believe that kindness and love is important, and gratitude and all those wonderful things. But what do we do to arm ourselves to be able to do this? And Ruth, I know, you're an expert in mindfulness and meditation. So what would you say is the role of mindfulness and meditation with helping us not only develop our own kindness approach, but also being able to kind of garner the benefits of self-kindness? How would you describe that? And what would you suggest?
Well, first of all, I'd like to define mindfulness for those of you who are not familiar with it. I use John Kabat-Zinn's definition: paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and here's the key word: non-judgmentally. Okay, and that is the key word. Why? And to go back to the person who just said they feel like they can't do it right, we're all wired that way. We have a negativity bias, right? And we have a difficult time being non-judgmental to ourselves. So you just think about the last time you messed up. What did you say to yourself? Oh my God, I screwed up. Major, I'm going to get fired. Nobody likes me here anyway. I'm going to lose my job, right? And so we do that self-talk. And then there's something else that goes on that you may not be aware of. And I wanted to call it to people's attention. I didn't make up this idea. It's from Brene Brown. It's called Scarcity Tapes. It's like we have this radio playing in the back of our mind. We freak out when something happens, right? And then there's the background noise from the radio based on how we're wired, our negativity bias. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough to be on this panel. I'm not rich enough to afford that. Can you do that? Can you fill in the blanks there? I'm not, right? You have a scarcity tape of choice, right? So this is going on all the time, these conversations in our head. So that's where mindfulness can come in. It's a wonderful tool. It can help us. How does it do it? It enables us to gain some space, objectivity, to take our emotional patterns as object. We have some distance. We can actually look at what's going on in our own minds. Okay, so mindfulness helps us to develop some perspective. The cool thing about mindfulness when we do this practice regularly, like brushing your teeth, is it also cultivates what is known in Sanskrit as Maitri, M-A-I-T-R-I. That's loving kindness toward ourselves. What that means is through mindfulness, we can actually begin to treat ourselves like we would treat our own best friend. Right? So it's a wonderful tool. Can I just say a little story?
I don't know. Shall we take a vote, panel? Should we?
No. Reg already left.
Reg,
so
yes or no?
Okay,
Kimya, what do you think?
so here's this is and I wrote it down because sometimes I go off on the story and I miss the punchline. So here's what I want to say. So the Buddha once asked a student, if a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful? Right? The Buddha went on. If a person is struck by a second arrow, is it more painful? Right? He then went on to explain, in life, we cannot always control the first arrow. However, and when I say the first arrow, I mean sickness, death, whatever, right? But the second arrow is our reaction to the first. Okay, so if we can control the second arrow through mindfulness practice, yes, there is suffering. There is suffering for everybody. There is joy. There is anxiety. We don't personalize it. We don't make it into a story. We have this distance, and by being able to take our emotions as object, to look at them, be curious about them, be in learner mind about them, we then create choice for ourselves. So mindfulness is a very, very powerful practice.
And Ruth, how would you gauge, if someone were to say, okay, all right, look, okay, fine, I'm going to be mindful, Ruth, but what's it going to get me? I mean, are there physical, mental benefits? I mean, give us the rundown.
Well, if you have that intention, what's it going to get me? I do recommend that you sit a lot. On the other hand, and I think what Patrick is getting to is what does Maitri, so what? So you like yourself better, right? And here we mean the small self, but I won't get into that. Okay, so here are some benefits of kindness. And the general principle is that we should all be loving and kind to each other, right? So, hello, it starts with the person wearing your name tag. Okay, that's what we're modeling, right? And then it helps us to deal with our destructive emotions, anxiety, stress, greed, you name it, right? It boosts our happiness levels. It helps us to be more resilient if we can be kind to ourselves with Maitri. We're more comfortable. Our daily existence is easier. There's research now to show that self-kindness and self-compassion that we can generate through a regular practice of mindfulness or some other centering practice also improves our immune system. Wouldn't that be great, right? So overall resilience and just in general, a better quality of life. Only you have to do a centering practice or mindfulness practice, if that's your practice of choice. You have to do it like you brush your teeth. You know, you've got to do it every day or regularly for it to have any benefit. And you know, to get good at anything, you have to train and prepare and keep at it. So.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. You know, I love the connection you've made there with resilience. And oftentimes when you look at the literature and certainly in the workplace, we often, it just drives me crazy. We often hear about resilience and having it associated with, you know, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, getting tougher, working those longer hours, you know, that's what resilience is. And in reality, Ruth, you just equated resilience to self-care. The very first thing was self-care. And that is so important. You know, Parker Palmer in his book, Let Your Life Speak, talks about, and it's such a beautiful quote, and I'm not going to do it justice, but he talks about self-care being the most unselfish act that you can participate in, because it's the only thing we can do to care for the gift that we give to others, the only gift we own to give to others, the only gift we really have to give to others, which is the gift of ourselves, the gift of our thoughts, of our prayers, of our love, of our caring. And if we don't take care of ourselves through the mindfulness practices and the meditation practices that you describe, we are not as well equipped to do that. And with the pace of change, and Ruth, you know, the VUCA world that you talk about all the time, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, in the world that we work and live in, it's just so overdue for all of us.
I would like to add, I think your point is well taken, and I explain it like it's like when you're on an airplane and the mask falls down and the stewardess says, put your mask on before helping somebody else. It's like that. You need to be kind to yourself first. It starts with you. Kindness in, kindness out, right? Mm-hmm. That's the ability to develop resonant relationships, which is so critical for leaders today. And then beyond that to the organization, and beyond that to the world. It must start with you.
Thank you, Ruth. And I want to jump, if I could, to the comment that Susan just put in. She said, we're slowly moving out of the age of tyrant bosses, crushing people to get the work done, which is wonderful. But how do we balance the kindness with effectiveness and mission accomplishment? Kimya, I'm going to give that one to you first, but I'm going to repeat that. How do we balance the kindness with effectiveness and mission accomplishment? I've seen too many kind managers get run over by their folks and fail to deliver at the end of the day. Kimya, do you have thoughts on that?
I think it's your definition of kindness. We mentioned earlier that kindness does not mean softness or weakness. Um, Kindness really means providing employees with information where you're being transparent. And so kindness is not an and or, it is together. You can be a strong, effective leader, getting the mission done, as well as being kind and considerate and empathetic. And those are the, I don't, if I was writing this as a formula, I'm not sure if the arrows would be going in one direction or the other direction, because they're one and the same. I'll give a brief example. I do 45 minutes to an hour monthly coffee with Kimya with my team. It takes a long time. I have a fairly large team, but it's important. And things get crazy, right? And connecting also with what Ruth said, one day I kind of just lost it. I was stressed out. Another data problem came up, and a person who brought it to me got the worst of me, right? And I paused, I talked to others, and the person told me, hey, give yourself a little bit of grace, right? And what I learned from that experience isn't that I probably was way too strong in using my words to describe what the employee did and did not do, but also because I built that one-on-one coffee, and we talked about anything. We talked about sports, we talked about finances, we talked about their kids. When I went back to the employee to say, I think my reaction was way too strong for what we were dealing with. He looked at me, because we're in a world of video, and he said, I figured it wasn't what I did. It was some of the stress that you were carrying at that time. And I was just that employee who you were talking with. This goes back to being kind. So for me, my kindness of giving them this hour a month to talk about anything really paid off dividends, because they're more than willing to put in the extra effort, as well as more than willing to give me the benefit of the doubt when I screw up. No one's perfect. We will not always have our A game going, and we should remember that. And so for the person who posed the question, it's not a and or, they're not mutually exclusive. This is the way in which you develop both kindness, but also leads to greater productivity.
Patrick, can I add something? Because I just wrote a blog on this. Kindness does not mean idiot compassion. Okay, idiot compassion is when you give someone what they want to make you feel better, right?
Mhm.
So kindness can actually be quite tough when you're giving someone feedback, right? When we learn how to do feedback effectively in Key, right? It comes out with saying the things that are hard to say lots of times. That's kindness, right? So effectiveness and efficiency and accountability do not go out the window at all. You're actually able to communicate the hard stuff. Remember about idiot compassion, though.
Yeah,
I think
thank you,
that's
Ruth.
I
Yeah,
think
Andrew,
that's
please.
I think that's a really great point. And Reg made it earlier too, about kindness sometimes means having those difficult conversations. Another part of my life, actually my first profession was magic, and I'm a magician. I've been doing magic for 52 years and I use it in my work.
He's really not joking, everyone. He's amazing. He's an amazing magician.
And
why are we having a magic show?
In
Pat?
fact, this isn't. It's not. This isn't even him. This is a magic trick you're looking at right here.
That's the after party, Ruth.
That's right.
But in the world of magic, there's this thing called the box jumper. And so the box jumper is the nickname for the magician's assistant, because they jump in and out of boxes. You jump in a box, you get cut in half, you get put back together. So the assistant's nickname is the box jumper. So you think about the box jumper knows the magician's secrets. The box jumper honors those secrets, keeps them secret. The box jumper wants to make the magician look good. And so the box jumper is brutally honest with the magician because they want to make them look good. And I think that's the kind of kindness that we're talking about here today, is when you have unconditional warm regard for other people and you want for other people what we all have the potential to be, which is, we're born these beautiful, it's why we treasure children, because we know they're beautiful, pure, good souls, and we're still those souls. And so if we want to honor that in each other, part of that, I think, is part of kindness is having difficult conversations. And you've got to, till the soil in order to have that and nurture the kind of environment. But I think that's the kind of kindness we're talking about. It's not that, Ruth, you called it idiot compassion, or it's not naive kindness or Pollyanna, but it's a kindness rooted in this unconditional warm regard and respect for the human spirit, I think.
The one thing I would add to that is kindness is a lot of work. When to do it right and to take all of that into consideration and to share yourself and your thoughts and hearing, I guess that Ruth say, squinting with your ears, that part of listening and conveying that back to an individual. There's a lot of hard work to do that right. And so when someone's kind, it's not like it's in passing or anything like that. It takes a lot of work. And so we should consider that as well.
Yeah, Kimya, it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit before. With kindness isn't necessarily softness, and it's not weakness. And there was a comment earlier from Henry. Henry, I didn't want to let this go past. We've kind of been touching on it about whatever happened to accountability. Well, I mean, kindness, holding people accountable in a kind way, is still holding people accountable. And what we found, at least in our experience in our program and working with the leaders we've worked with, is that when you have an environment that's marked by kindness and compassion and caring, it's a lot easier to hold people accountable. And not only is it a lot easier to hold people accountable, it's a lot easier to get rid of them when you have to. Because if you care, if you really care, and if we're not, faking doesn't work. We know neurologically you can't fake your way through that kind of thing. But if you do create those kind of environments, it does make it easier. I mean, we're still facing what we face with firing the federal government. I understand that. But it is a way. It doesn't mean that we're not holding people accountable, not even a little bit. That's something we absolutely have to do. We absolutely we are sworn to do. So one other thing I wanted to ask is we're getting down here to the last few minutes, and I'm going to keep track of the questions as they wander in here. But just one thing that I wanted to ask, and that is this, because we kind of talked about this a little bit before, and that is about the idea of the professionalism. I still see. So one of the great quotes by Maya Angelou was that people will never remember what you said or did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I've used that quote in front of groups before, and about a third of the people in the room will go, yeah, she's so right. A third of the people will have no reaction because they're checking their phones, and then the other third will roll their eyes. And it's the third that rolls their eyes that worry me, because it's almost like it's unprofessional. Is it unprofessional? Is it unprofessional, Reg, to be kind? I mean, what is the argument there?
I think reflecting back on Kimya's point, and I think those of us who study this, those of us who attempt to teach it, or at least encourage it, understand that emotional intelligence is, and honing those features and aspects of emotional intelligence is not easy, and practicing it is sometimes even harder given some of the characters that you have to practice it with, or lead. Um, kindness, as far as I'm concerned, is a prerequisite. It is, in some respects, the most professional way to relate to one another. If you can, well, we're all wired a little bit differently, but at least in my experience, most people shut you down when they turn you off because you've been unkind to them. So you may be giving directions, thinking that you're having tremendous impact because everybody's sitting there, appearing to be listening to you, but most of them have shut you off in ways that you'll never even know because you treated them with disrespect, with no measure of empathy, with no measure of caring about them. It's just all I want is the work done. I don't care about you. Just, I don't care if you're, there's a story I started to tell, and because Kimya said she wasn't going to share in the agency that she was describing, I was thinking, well, the only place I've been in the last 15 years before retirement was Social Security. So if I tell the story, they'll know exactly where this happened. It is unbelievable to me what people will tolerate out of fear. And Andrew alluded to this earlier. People often stay in situations and either work themselves to death or wear themselves out emotionally because they have to get that paycheck and they are afraid to move out from under this abusive boss. And they're also afraid of this abusive boss and just languish in this misery until they finally get enough years to retire. And that's the thing that drives me absolutely crazy. I've seen so many people retire in anger because they were under someone who didn't show them simple kindness. I'm not even talking about making them their star employee and putting them on a pedestal. I just mean common decency. And so, I think it is absolutely the professional way to relate to each other in the workplace.
Thank you, Reg. And I thank you so much for addressing that. We are down to about the last 11 minutes. And before we go, I do want to give all of our panelists a chance to have kind of one last message, one last comment to share with everyone. And before I do that, I want to say thank you to all of you again, Kimya, Ruth, Andrew, Reg. Love you guys. You're awesome to work with. Such an honor to be in your world anywhere. So thank you all for being here. Ruth, let's start with you. So what's the last thing you'd like to have everybody take away today in terms of our message today?
Probably learn how to hold yourself in the cradle of loving kindness. It starts with you. The world needs you to be able to do that. So whatever is your tool, you're not wired to do it. So find a centering practice, be it prayer, be it kayaking, be it mindfulness, and learn to develop Maitri.
Thank you, Ruth. Andrew, what are your thoughts, my friend?
Well, I just think I know there's so many people out there joining us today that are in leadership and management roles, and you have such an opportunity to lift people up. It's one thing, we need to work, we need to have jobs. Jobs are important. Getting the job done is absolutely essential. And there's more, there's an opportunity. This gift of life that we've all been given is so precious. And to be able to lift other people up and make this world a better place is something that, because you're a manager or a leader and you have an impact, you have an influence on other people's lives, you can lift people up. You can make the world a better place. And right now, I think there's a massive battle going on between love and fear. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let fear win. We have this opportunity in our evolution as the human species to fight against our primitive brain who wants to be afraid and wants to pull us in that direction. And I'm going to fight like hell to transcend that and try to come from love whenever I can and to lift other people up. That is, I know I sound probably like the Beatles now, but what the world, I don't know, that wasn't the Beatles. What the world needs
He's
now.
now is Love, Sweet Love. Who was
Sweet
that?
Love.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Burt Bacharach wrote it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's true, isn't it? Well, we need love right now. We need it. And it is not a soft thing. It's, you know what? It's easier to be critical. It's easier to react to our primitive brain than it is to take a breath, as Ruth has so beautifully described, to be present and say, okay, yep, there's my tendency to, to react, and I have a different choice. I'm going to make a different choice, and I'm going to be loving and kind. That's the opportunity that we have right now.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for that. Kimya, what about you? What are your parting thoughts?
I think I would say, one, remember to see the beauty in data because it's you. Two, kindness is strength. And remember to allow yourself some grace. And you don't have to have that title. You don't have to have a group where you're in a more official leadership position. Offer kindness to your peers, to your neighbor, to, your supervisor, to your colleagues. It becomes second nature. And with that, you build trust. You're more efficient. You're able to build a stronger relationship with that person. And so when things hit the fan, which they will, you'll be able to more quickly react in a way to get things done.
Thank you, Kimya. Reginald, we're going to give you the last word, my friend.
Oh, thank you. When Andrew was talking about his being a magician, it reminded me of a message I always tried to get across to my leaders. It's the word and the trigger for it. I was thinking when he talked about being a magician, I thought of funambulist, which is tightrope walker. And I always equated our work in the public sector and leadership as walking a tightrope. And you can either do it with a net or you can do it without. And if you're kind to your people, they will be your safety net. And they will get things done for you. But when you fall off that rope at that high altitude, they'll catch you before you hit the ground. And so it's about survival.
Thank you, Reggie. Appreciate that very much. And I want to say thank you as well to all the folks that chimed into the chat, especially this last few minutes where Trisha came in with Bert, and then George, our own George, came in with All You Need Is Love. That would be the Beatles song. And Susan, Let Love Rule, Lenny Kravitz. I love that. It's anytime we can work in those lyrics, it's a really good thing. For those of you that attended today, we thank you so much for being part of this discussion. We are the Key Executive Leadership Programs. This is the Key Executive Leadership family. If you want to reach out to any one of our panelists, feel free, just send us an email. We can connect you directly with them if you'd like to follow up with conversations or get advice. I know they'd be happy to be there for you. Please consider attending our future TED Talk, our future FEDTalks. TED Talks. Well, you can see those too, but our future FEDTalks, which we have through the rest of the year, along with our Women in Leadership Forum, our Pride in Leadership Forum, our Key Executive Leadership Conference, the Roger Jones Awards, all the stuff that we do throughout the year as part of the Key Executive Leadership Programs. We appreciate so much the work you all do. For those of you that are working in the nonprofit world, the public service world, the private sector, for all you do to make our civilization a better place, thank you so much. And we greatly appreciate you joining us today. So thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Fed Talk. All right. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone.